and welcome back to Bookish Theories! In today's video, we'd like to talk about Dark Moon with a Knife and focusing on a little breakdown and analysis of episode 3 both on Webtoon and on Wattpad to see what they can tell us about the Blood Altar. Please keep in mind that this video will contain spoilers for the third episode on both platforms, so now that we got that out of the way, let's jump right in starting from the Webtoon. Now the third episode kicks off right where we left off back in episode 2. Despite Ellie's wish to befriend Sua, Solon banned his brothers from interacting with the girl, so in the last installment, the chapter ended with Sua overhearing this conversation by mistake. Solon's words obviously hurt Sua, and in this new chapter we actually discovered that people have been treating her all her life in the very same way. Much like we saw all the way back in episode 1 for instance, Sua was always different, and because of that she was always treated like an outcast. People always mocked her, judged her, hated her, and Sua had to deal with this situation ever since she could remember. After catching Solon's words, Sua figures that this time is going to be no different, and this is something that brings her pain because she was really hoping that her arrival at the Deselis Academy would mark the beginning of a brand new start. Little does she know, however, that their sudden appearance actually made quite an impression, because as soon as the boys see her, they're so overwhelmed by her presence that they rush by her side to introduce themselves. Now that Gino and Shion are very happy to meet her is not really a surprise, right? Because even in the last episode, the two of them were very excited about this new arrival. When it comes to Ian, however, it's a completely different story, because the second he saw Sua, the man did a complete 180. If in the last episode Ian was siding with Solon, now that he actually saw Sua, he completely changed his mind to the point that he's encouraging the girl to ignore what Solon just said. Despite Solon's growing irritation, moreover, the other boys are incredibly welcoming towards Sua, so when Ellie proposes to give her a tour of the academy, the others join in and force Solon to tag along as well. Now, since my girl Sua mentioned that she liked books, the very first stop of the tour is obviously the library, which I'm gonna say is actually kind of dope. Like, my all-time favorite library is obviously the one from Beauty and the Beast, because that's the best one ever. Absolutely, but you know, this one is cool too. They got it right. It got the big book in the center, it got the plants, it got the blue carpet, you know, overall I would say Bookish approved. Also, another thing that makes this library very interesting is that it seems to have a restricted section of some sorts, because the book that Ellie has been carrying around since the very beginning is not a book that anybody can borrow. You need special permission to do so, and Ellie promises to tell Sua everything about it as soon as he finishes reading it, and to be honest, this is a very interesting information to keep in mind. You see, the attention that the story is putting on this book is a little bit suspicious, because as I mentioned in my previous video, vampires and books seem to be more connected than what it seems. If you remember, in the previous chapter, Sua said that before she was born, vampires only existed in books. Then we see Ellie carrying around a book containing old stories, and now we discover that certain books from the library actually need special permission in order to be read. This might imply that in the future we might actually learn some new information through some of the books of the restricted section, but for now we'll have to wait and see. In the meantime, however, the campus tour continues with a visit to the classrooms, and here we discover the characters' respective grades. Sue and Shion, for instance, are both in 10th grade and will be classmates because of that. Ian and Gino are in 11th grade, while Ellie is in 12th grade instead. Sue is actually very surprised about that, because the boys seem pretty close despite of the age difference, and at this point, Ellie reveals why that is. You see, even if the boys are not blood brothers, they grew up together in the same orphanage, because none of them actually have any parents. This is also coherent with what we saw in the story so far, because if in videos like Given and Taken and Drunken Dazed we saw the boys living in the orphanage, in Tamed and Dashed we saw the same boys escaping from the place and out into the woods. Up until now we don't know what the brothers ran away in this specific timeline, but what we do know is that there are two members of this unit yet to be introduced. These members are none other than Jacka and Noah, who are respectively Jungwon and Nikki's characters, as well as the most competitive Nightball players in the team. When the campus tour group eventually arrives at the Nightball field, Jacka and Noah are practicing with the other players for the upcoming game, and at this point we get a taste of how powerful these vampires actually are, because Jacka almost kills Sua by sending the ball their way. Luckily enough, Ian has his superpowers too, so before the girl realizes what is going on, Ian blocks the ball and Gino and Shion shield her with their bodies. The one that took the shielding the next level, however, is actually Ellie, because his shielding actually turns into hugging very quick. Now this is actually the straw that breaks the camel's back, because even if Sua is physically alright, all these emotions and social interactions are far too much for her to bear. You see, since Sua was always an outcast, she's obviously not used to having so much attention and protection, so she's so overwhelmed by it that she runs away in panic. When she finally gets back to her room, however, we discover that Solon is there waiting for her, so this episode ends with him cornering the girl in order to intimidate her. Now we'll actually discuss what Grumpy has in mind in my next video about the Blood Altar, but in the meantime let's take a look at the Wattpad because there is quite a lot to unpack. Now in the last chapter, the story ended with Sua and Ellie going on an ice cream date and Sua having an existential crisis because of that. If you remember, the whole point of Sua's dilemma was that she wants to have a normal life, even if her life is anything but. She's got superpowers, the cool guy wants to date her, and on top of that, vampires exist, which in this version of events is something that she didn't know up until now. You see, even if she dreamt about these creatures all her life, she always thought that they were ghosts and that she was the only one who was able to see them. After the vampire attacked her in the alley, however, Sua discovered that this is not really the case, but little does she know that Ellie is about to add some fire to the flame. After confirming that what she saw was indeed a vampire, Ellie actually reveals that if in this reality vampires exist, then surprise surprise, so do werewolves as well. Before Sua is even able to register this information, however, Ellie actually excuses himself and rushes towards Ian, who in the meantime, not very far from them, is about to square up with two boys that Sua never saw before. When she looks closer, Sua actually notices that these two individuals are wearing a uniform from the Sunshine City school, so at this point we finally get our very first written encounter with the werewolves of the story. Now, as it was introduced all the way back in Drunken Days, the werewolves are played by the members of the upcoming group from Bookish Japan, and since so far this group has 4 members, this is how many werewolves we meet in the Blood Altar. As we see in my next videos, in chapter 6 of the webtoon, the 4 members of the pack are introduced as Kan, Angie, Najak and Tile. Kan is obviously Kei, Angie is Iju, Najak is Nicholas, while Tile is Taki. If in Drunken Days the video introduced us to Kan and Angie, however, this time around the Wattpad is giving us Kan and Najak. Now in the story, the Sunshine City School and the Desalis Academy are actually rivals in the Nightball League, and if the vampires are part of the Desalis team, the werewolves play for the Sunshine City instead. As the chapter tells us, Kan is the leader of his team, so to an extent this makes him the werewolf counterpart of Ellie, who in turn is the vampire leader of the Desalis team. When Ellie joins Ian to confront Kan and Najak, however, it becomes very apparent that these two teams don't like each other very much, and as it turns out, this rivalry actually has very deep roots. You see, if in traditional literature vampires and werewolves are two species always at war with each other, in Dark Moon this tradition continues, because in the story these two groups are arch-enemies that cannot even stand each other's smell. This is enough for them to square up every time they meet, even by chance, and this time around is no different, because Ian and Najak are about to fight even if neither of them actually incited this conflict to begin with. Despite of that, however, both Ellie and Kan actually understand that they cannot be making a scene in front of everybody in broad daylight, so before anything happens, the two leaders actually take their respective brothers and walk away before anything happens. Even if this confrontation is postponed for yet another day, however, Ian is still furious, so furious in fact that he starts ranting about the wolves and their long-time rivalry. Overcome by anger, Ian starts ranting that he doesn't like the wolves, that they smell, and that they are delusional for even thinking that the Desalis boys have done something to wrong them. At this point, Ellie tries to silence him, because let's not forget that Sua is still there and still listening. Ian, however, is an unstoppable force, so before he knows it, he essentially spills that there are vampires in front of the girl. As soon as Ian understands what he has done, the boy takes off, leaving Ellie to fix his mess, but despite Ellie's panic, Sua responds surprisingly well, because she actually tells him to go eat ice cream instead. Now at this point we finally get some much needed exposition, because even if Ellie wasn't exactly planning on outing himself as a vampire just yet, he eventually decides to tell her the truth and nothing but the truth. As the two of them sit down to eat ice cream, Ellie actually reveals that the 7 main members of the Desalis Nightball team are all vampires in their own right. In turn, however, the 7 main players of the Sunshine City team are werewolves instead, and this is actually very interesting because this little detail essentially confirms that the upcoming group will be comprised of 7 members as well. As of right now, we only know 4 members because Kate, Aki, Nicholas and Iju are the only ones confirmed in the lineup, but the Audition project is still going on, so the other 3 members will be chosen through that. In the meantime, however, let's focus on the story, because in the chapter, Sua is having a hard time understanding what is going on. Bear in mind, in this version of events, Sua only discovered the day before that vampires existed, but now she has to come to terms with the fact that Ellie and the others are vampires, and that werewolves exist as well. As you can imagine, that's a lot to digest in one sitting, and on top of that, Sua just wanted to be normal, which now more than ever seems a goal that seems impossible to reach. This is a realization that to an extent makes her mad, because all she wants is to live peacefully and mind her own business. She doesn't want anything to do with ghosts, vampires, werewolves. Sua doesn't want that life, but Ellie is now dragging her into this new world, and to be honest, Sua is not liking that at all. You see, according to Sua, not being normal is actually a bad thing, because all her life, her being different brought her nothing but pain. Sua goes as far as to say that being different is none other than a curse, but Ellie completely disagrees with this, because for him, being different is a blessing. Now, this is obviously a direct reference to the concept portrayed in Blessed and Cursed, because much like ENHYPEN's journey as idols, Ellie and Sua's experiences can be seen as a blessing or a curse depending on the way that we look at it. On one hand, being different can be seen as a curse, because standing out for whatever reason can make you a target, can isolate you, and can make it very difficult to fit in. On the other hand, however, being different can also be a blessing, because what makes you different also makes you special, and this uniqueness is what makes you the person that you are. According to Ellie, this is the very reason why Sua is special and he was able to find her, but Sua is very conflicted about this, because to her, he is the one who is special and he is the one who shines bright. Sua here doesn't see herself the way Ellie does, so his honest words make her so confused that she eventually leaves by ending the date on the spot. That night, Sua is unable to sleep, and the more she tries to forget about Ellie's words, the more she thinks about them instead. As she relieves the scene in her mind, Sua slowly falls asleep, and she actually starts having one of her dreams. As we already established in episode 2, for instance, Sua always had very strange visions, but ever since she met Ellie started to show up in her dreams as well. This time around is no different, so when she falls asleep, Sua essentially dreams of several people standing on a beach and surrounded by the fog. In the dream, Sua sees these people looking down on what seems to be somebody's body. When she comes closer, the girl recognizes Ellie among the men inspecting the corpse, and even if she should really pay more attention to what is going on, she's only able to focus on Ellie's handsome face. The words that he told her in real life resonate in the dream as well, and as she admires his beauty, she wishes for Ellie to say these words once more. Now at this point, something very interesting takes place, because as soon as Sua thinks that, the Ellie in the dream turns around as if he's looking for something in the fog. He looks and looks until all of a sudden his eyes end up meeting Sua's eyes. Before she knows it, Ellie reaches out, takes her hands, and literally pulls her out of the dream and back into the real world. As Sua exits the fog, she essentially wakes up on the beach, and at this point Ellie smiles because he found her like he said he would. This chapter ends with Ellie repeating to Sua that she's special, so Sua's wish came true, and this is very important, especially in the chapters to come. For now, however, we'll have to wait and see. But what do you think? Do you like the werewolves showing up in Dark Moon? And what do you think about Sua's new power? Let me know in the comments down below. In the meantime, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please think about liking and subscribing. As always, thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye bye!